Do you evaluate yourself continuously? I noticed this earlier in the week and I was actually shocked to know that this is something that I do. And my heart in sharing this with you today is, as always, that it will help your heart also. What I noticed was that my inner dialogue was something that stands in judgment of me all the time. So no matter what I was doing, it was a critic that was evaluating what I was doing. Do you know what I mean? For example, you just went and had coffee with one of your friends, and afterwards you're thinking about what you could have said differently, or how you could have said something differently, or wondering how they interpreted what you said. Or it could be a simple conversation with your spouse or someone that you love, and it actually goes well, but nevertheless, when they leave the room, you start thinking, what if you had said something differently? How you could have handled things better? And at first glance, this might seem good because we're being insightful and we're looking within to see how we might change or grow. And of course, that's positive, growing and evaluating ourselves from the stance of how can I be a better person? How can I improve on my skills? Absolutely, but this goes much further than that. And again, I think that we all have this going on to a greater or lesser extent, and it's not helping us in any way. So the voice is always one of criticism. It's always how we could have done something better, how we could have handled things better, what we could have done other than what we did. That's a really big one. What could we have done other than what we did? And particularly when we use that to look at things in our past and think what we could have done or should have done so that life would have turned out differently than it presently is. Of course, all this internal talk, this self-evaluating, doesn't bring any positive outcome. It doesn't help us in any way, isn't helping us to grow or to expand. So then I started to think, why do we do this? Because sometimes if we understand why we do what we do, it's easier to change it or eradicate it depending upon what is necessary. And my thought was surely to eradicate a habit where I am continuously examining myself, which is unnecessary. So why would we do this? Why would we criticize ourselves? Why would we look internally all the time to see what we could have done differently? First, I'll say it takes a lot of energy to do this, and surely, I'm sure you and I could allocate our energies toward things that would be much more positive and productive, and in actuality, just not be self-destructive. I know that's not our intent. Absolutely, it's not your intent or my intent to be self-destructive when we're evaluating ourselves, but ultimately, it doesn't build us up. And it does tear us down. So why? Why do we do this? Well, of course, there could be our own personal reasons. We just got into that habit of evaluating ourselves, or probably for most of us, there were environments in which either we grew up or we worked or had other life experiences, and people were harsh or critical with themselves and with us. And we picked up on that. I think, though, even if that's not your case or my case, that it's something so personal, I believe it's something greater that's occurring that causes us to do this. So I'll share that with you and see if it's something that you relate to. In the United States, which is where I live, and so I can speak mostly for this nation, we actually are perfectionists in so many ways. When we look around, whether it's at advertising or at the mall or when we're out running errands, everything that we see is being sold to us, or most of it, I would say at least, is being sold to us based on the premise that somehow it would make us better. For women, it's the obvious well, it could be for men also, but for women, I think it's more enforced by the powers that be, that they advertise to have us evaluate our appearance And then overall, though, products that are sold and the places that we go, whether it's the movies or to a show, it's always enforcing this idea that something's wrong and somehow we could do better than we are doing. And I've lived long enough to remember when it wasn't that complicated. Life just wasn't that complicated, and we weren't therefore always striving to be better than who we are and what we are. So I think most of what we're doing internally is because we're picking up on what is occurring externally, and then it's become so much a part of ourselves that we don't even realize that this is ongoing. So what can we do about it? First is we have to decide, which I surely have, if this is something that I want to continue to do. And I think the best way to evaluate if this voice, this inner critic, this voice that we use to evaluate ourselves continuously, is it something that's helpful or not helpful? And also a criteria for that could be, would we do this to someone else? And I know we wouldn't. You surely wouldn't criticize someone else like that ongoing, and I wouldn't either. So why would we continue to do that to ourselves? Maybe we think it would better us. Maybe we think it would help us to expand and grow, but I think there's a much better way that we can do that. So first would be deciding whether or not we wanted to continue to evaluate ourselves continuously, to critique ourselves and to find what's wrong and make it right, quote unquote. And in my hope that your heart is to be kind and loving toward yourself, as mine is for me also, my offering is that anytime we hear that voice, first, we recognize that it's happening. And second, we just take a moment to realize that it's unnecessary, it's unkind, and just not allow it anymore. So I've begun that journey this week, and I can say hasn't been an easy journey so far, changing the way that I talk within myself, but the times that I have stopped it and I have been kind to myself, it makes my life so much better. And I think that you'd probably feel the same as I do, which is that there's already so much turmoil and uneasiness and criticism that's going on in our world right now, that if we can each choose to be gentle and kind within ourselves, and then as we go out in the world, obviously we express that gentleness and kindness in our posture, in the way that we carry ourselves, I think it's a great decision for us to just decide to be kinder to ourselves. So my hope is that what I've shared with you is something that you relate to. I don't want you to have an inner critic. I don't want you to have a voice internally where you evaluate yourself. And my hope and prayer is that you don't have that. But if you do, I want you to know that I believe it's very common and that I also have that. And it is something worth looking at and changing, because why will we be unkind toward ourselves? Why will we criticize ourselves? Just no good comes from that, and that's not something that we deserve to do to ourselves. So I ask you to remember that you are amazing, you are a miracle. There is so much about you that is good and positive and uplifting and helpful and hopeful and amazing, and that anytime this week you hear that inner critic trying to voice its opinion, quote unquote, that you'll take a moment to realize that just because others are doing that in the outside world through advertising and other forms to try to get us to evaluate ourselves continuously, we don't have to do that to ourselves, and that you deserve all the kindness and all the love and all the goodness, both internally and externally. Thanks for taking the time to listen. As always, God loves you. I love you. Have a blessed week.